get started. Here we go. It's May the 7th, 2003. This is Kathy Lang. I'm recording from Nathaniel Green Lodge in Green Township, Ohio. And with me is Mr. George Fitch. George, tell us where and when you were born, please.
May the 7th, 1920, in Cincinnati, Ohio, on 3rd Street. I lived there all my life and was living in 940 Elbron Avenue then, in an old Whittier School apartment. And I was inducted in the Army May the 17th. I was inducted in the Army May this, oh goodness sakes here. Inducted in the Army January 27th. I was drafted. I had a low draft number, I was lucky. And
In 19 what? 19, what year was that?
1942, and we were inducted into Fort Thomas, Kentucky. They didn't have any clothing or material, so they put us on KP, so we got to peel potatoes and everything. And got some of our training there. From there, we went to Camp Atterbury, the proving grounds in Maryland. And that's where we got our basic training. We took probably a 16-week course in about 3 or 4 weeks. And we had a battalion review 4 companies of ordnance people and in front of the colonel. And our company had a new captain, and when we were marching, the captain hollered, "Company ready, do it," and we all ran into each other. So I got gigged there on inspection of company. I had my pants hung up with it not zipped up. I got a week's confinement to the company area for that. And then we were shipped to Fort Meade to make, there was only 1 tank ordnance company in the Army at that time. And we were the second one, so we formed our company at Fort Meade, Maryland. And we got our training, and they served our food there in bowls instead of in a line, in first come, first get. And when we finished our training there, we were given a 3-day pass to go home. I went home and I went on a bus, and it must have taken me about 20 or 22 hours. So I had to draw money out of the bank to do that because we only got $21 a month. So I went back on a train. I think that was only 6 or 12 hours, so I had a little more time. And most of the fellas thought they would wait till we got a week's vacation before they took it. So a lot of them didn't take the 3 days. And then we loaded on the Queen Mary. We were the first ones on the Queen Mary. So we were guards for the 1st Armored Division. There was 10,000 of them. And we sailed and stayed on the Queen Mary for 34 days. We went to Glasgow, Scotland. That's where the 1st Armored got off. And they cleaned the ship, refueled it, and then we took on 12,000 British 8th Army troops. The British would put on as high as 15,000 troops, but the Americans didn't want them that crowded. Their limit was 10,000. So we sailed and we needed fuel. We went into Cape Town. It was too rough. We couldn't fuel up there. So we went into Simonstown and fueled up there. Then we started to sail around Africa. We got to the Red Sea, and one of our soldiers went crazy and died. He was sticking his hand in a fan and butting his head against the wall. We had to put him over the back because we needed refrigeration for food. And we either come into Egypt in either Cairo or Fort Tewfik. And the Germans were nice enough to give us an air raid as soon as we got there. And we took over a base camp there where we serviced tanks next to a fighter field in Heliopolis in Cairo, Egypt. But when we got there, the rumor was that General Akalak, the British head general, was killed. So we were a little leery. The British had always had to retreat. They would stop General Rommel, and then he would run around the end. But at El Alamein, the ends were swamps. And I'll get into that later. Anyway, we evacuated. We even burned money. And we loaded on a plane. We didn't weigh off, and we just about didn't make, we thought we were going to hit a tree at the end of the runway. We were so heavy. And we went to Asmara in Ethiopia, to the base camp of Italians, and we had to guard against Italian prisoners of war. They said, take it easy on us today because we were going to work for them tomorrow. And the corporal was in charge of assembling two Opels, German Chevrolets, and I was clerk to handle about 30 or 40 prisoners of war fixing Fiat trucks. And we had one case of sabotage where they put sugar in the gas tank. And I went hunting. We only had 10 rounds of ammunition in the 1903 rifle, and we needed food, so I asked, we as a group asked if we could go hunting for gazelles. So several of us went, and we didn't see any, but we seen a herd of wild baboons. I guess it's a herd. And that's one of them was going to fire at them, and the fellow in charge says, don't fire at them, they got sharp teeth. We only got 10 rounds. If they attacked us, we're going to get hurt. So we stayed there, and the taxi cabs had gasoline and charcoal burners on the rear bumper for a ride. And they had spearheads there from the Ethiopian campaign, also had ammunition with hollow point bullets in it, which is illegal in warfare. And we went back to Egypt, and Montgomery was put in charge, and at El Alamein he got all the 25-pounders he could get, which is the weight of the shell of the cannon. And Hitler told Rommel not to stay at El Alamein, to hold that line. And when they started to get the bombardment, General Montgomery was in World War I. He was going to disintegrate Rommel's army, and Hitler told him to stay there. He retreated, and we were in Tunis, Bizerta, Tripoli, Benghazi, and then we got ready. While we were in Africa, after, thanks to the Americans and the British, they defeated, the first ones to defeat the Germans. Bob Hope and Francis Langford and Jerry Clonan and came over to entertain us. And King George V come over to entertain us also. So,
what did he do for entertainment?
well, he congratulated us because we were the first ones to defeat the Germans. And then we had tanks with us that we serviced, so I volunteered to be a gunner on a light tank going from Africa to Italy. And we were in the staging area ready to go, and the staff sergeant in counterintelligence said, "You're a counterintelligence agent." I was probably the last one left in Africa to get ready for loading the boat. But the first day out, it was foggy her night. We couldn't depart. So Corporal and I had a light tank man out of my company. I was a gunner. We sailed to Africa, and it was a light tank and a jeep and some soldiers, a light landing craft, and it rained that night or day, and I had to sleep. They wouldn't give me hot water for coffee or a place to sleep. I had to sleep in the tank with the hatch down on the driver's seat, and I'd go to sleep and wake up and wake up. Well, we got to Salerno, and the driver said, "You're going to have to take your shoes off and wade in to see how deep it was." So that's what I did, and that's the way I went to Italy. But they had a hard battle there. They almost retreated there in Salerno. And we made camp at Pompeii. Well, while we were at Pompeii, Vesuvius was erupting. So we did a lot of heavy praying. We thought maybe it would disintegrate the Fifth and the English Eighth Army. So we did a lot of heavy praying. And the battlefront, after it moved up to Conserma, they decided to invade behind the land. So we went in a landing craft tank, the big one with tanks, trucks, and everything. When we got to Anzio, we started to unload, and a German fighter was on us. So the first strafe over, he killed the MP at the corner directing traffic. So we finally, as we were going to base camp, we were next to a fighter field there. He strafed us 2 more times. So, and then when we got to the base camp, we had the prisoners of war in the buildings, and the fella in the half track was firing at him, and he knocked him out of the half track, and I told him to get back in there and fire at him. He said, "To heck with it, I'm not going to do that no more." So at Anzio, the Germans had 270 guns firing at us. It was approximately a 17 by 37 mile area. And one of them was my girlfriend, Anzio Annie. That was a 16-inch rail gun. They had 2 of them. She talked to us all the time, and we paid strict attention to her and gave her, watched out for her all the time, looking for her. The fighters couldn't find it. We were there for 3 months. And they dug in rather than advance. Hitler said, "Destroy Rome." The only thing I can say about Truscott, he was in charge of the Fifth Army at Anzio, that the rumor was there were 200,000 German shock troops north of there. If we would have advanced, we might have disintegrated Rome. So that was the best thing. And in Rome, we had one of our fellows in the company got an Italian tractor for artillery piece. It had rubber tires and metal things that went over the top of it, and it bent in the middle. And he fixed it up and got it running, and the captain said the infantry wanted it to run it on no man's land and set off the mines. And he says, "You're not going to get it." And he says, I need to take it. And the fellow says, "I'm going to shoot you, Captain, if you take it." And we had to put him under 24-hour guard duty, and I don't know whatever happened to him. And after they broke out, the reason we were able, they were able to break out. They invaded Normandy. The odd part was that we were in the war 2 years before Normandy, and that withdrew them 200,000 troops, so we were able to break through. And we did stop in Rome and were supposed to move the next day, but we took an R&R there. And when we moved north of Rome, well, we moved north of there to Leghorn and sent a soldier back to the States. They took him back in a truck, and he got to the port, and they arrested him for carrying a rifle. And of course that happened. In Rome, I get retreat a little bit. At Anzio, one of the 1st Armored Division tanks pulled out of the line, and the sergeant and me, I was going to be the driver, volunteered to go in. I could have cried, figuring we may lose 50 or 100,000 men. But the time I had it running and ready to go, and he said he could handle a gun. So we were ready to go, and the captain said, well, he went back in the line, you don't have to do it. So I got 5 days R&R in Rome, got to see the catacombs, the Vatican and Emmanuel Paulus and 3 coins in the fountain. And then we went up to Leghorn, and that was that. We got, then we went to Florence. We were held up in 1945 at the Po Valley. The Germans were on the mountains, and it was winter time. We didn't think it was a good time to advance. So we were above a peat mine in Florence. I spent one day at the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and that's the main thing. Then we came back to the state on a Liberty ship, and every time you're on a boat, the Army only gets 2 meals a day. So that's quite a thing. I was lucky enough when I come back, actually when I came back from Florence, they gave me 30 days. What happened, the colonel got made brigadier general, and instead of giving us 2 or 3 out of the company to take 30 days rest and to go back to Italy, we got 16, and I was one of them, and I told them I wanted to get 6 months, I wanted a rotation. They said, we want you back, take it or else. So I got that, I took it, and when I came home, they extended my leave to another 30 days, and during that period, Germany surrendered. And they said, if you have 85 points, they'll make a civilian out of you. So I had 89 points. I had to backtrack again. This colonel that made brigadier general said he'd get his men home before they had 3 years. We had 34 months in, so he was trying to get us all R&R before we had 3 years. And I was fortunate enough to be in the States. I had 89 points, 5 for each year, so that made 15 points. No, 5 for each Bronze Star, and anyway, I had 89 points and only need 8. I got discharged out of Camp Atterbury in Indiana, and I was very fortunate. The Lord was with us all the time. There's no atheists in the Army, Navy, or Air Force. You have to make up your mind and be with the Lord and Jesus and the Holy Ghost. If you're going to die, you'll be with the Lord in heaven, and you'll be in paradise. So clear your mind, have faith, and I was glad to serve in the Army.
Now tell me a little bit about your job was maintaining tanks.
Yeah, I was first had to in Africa, change a track and put new tread on tanks, swing a sledgehammer. And I actually tried getting under it one time, holding the bar. You had to hold it by hand where somebody swung a sledgehammer, and that's not too nice. And then I promoted to work on the transmission, and then finally I got to work on the turret, and then at Anzio, after I volunteered to go to the front, they made me clerk in keeping track of the progress. I was a clerk before I went in on the progress of the tanks in our shops. The Germans had dropped a bomb on one of our shops and hit a light tank. And I was working with Lieutenant Buttons. So I really had a little better place to be, and
Did you have a background in mechanics when you went into the Army?
well, I went to Whittier, Western Hills, and automotive. I was supposed to be a mechanic, but I was working as a clerk at Formica in the shipping department.
When you got drafted, did you want to be a mechanic in the Army, or did they just give you that job?
Well, that's another odd point. They asked me what I'd like to do, and I said hunting and fishing, so they recommended me on my discharge to be sent in the infantry. But what happened, the British needed new tanks. The old Grant tank, they would be hit and it wouldn't penetrate, but the rivets would fly loose on the inside and kill the crew. And the other bad part was the German tank could knock out the American Grant tank before the British, the American tank was within range. Well, they got the Sherman tanks. That's what saved me. They got the Sherman tanks, and they needed to make one ordnance company heavy maintenance tank right away, because most of the fighting would be in tanks on level ground. And there only was one in the Army, so they had to form one right away.
So your group was formed to take care of the Sherman tank.
We service anywhere from wristwatches to tanks or 155 millimeter watches. And also in Italy, we serviced General Patton's pistols.
Did you ever see General Patton?
I didn't see General Patton, no, I didn't. I didn't see too many generals.
So you were a mechanic, and you worked for the Brit, you helped the Brits, right?
I was in the English 8th Army, yeah.
So you
we
were
had tea and
every day you had
bully
tea.
beef.
How'd you like working with the Brits?
Well, we got along on the Queen Mary, the 12,000 British 8th Army troops. They invited us to boxing matches. We did pretty good, so. And that's another odd thing. Our first sergeant, mess sergeant, was a strong man in the service. He had muscles you wouldn't believe. He got drunk one day in the barracks and was going to clean it out, and I got out of there.
So you had no problems working with the Brits, everyone got along pretty well.
We had one problem in Italy. We were working on our job and everything, and the provost marshal man come around, and he said, "You fellas look like a bunch of civilians and Italians. You don't have your stripes on, you don't salute." He says, "Get your stripes on and salute." So the captain says, when there's official around, salute and do that. And we had fatigues on to work on tanks and jeeps and everything.
Was it a hard job to keep those tanks running, or were they pretty easy to fix?
Well, actually, we were in the Fiat plant in Rome, where they had diesel trucks we took over as a base camp. We either worked second, third, or fourth echelon, second and third echelon, third and fourth. First and second were behind the line. We were maybe 20 or 30 miles back, but in tank warfare, they can make that kind of progress in a day. So we had to be ready to move anytime rather than be captured. And actually, when we moved from Rome, we moved to another area, and I was driving a medium tank, a Sherman tank, and I went to the new area, and actually I went to the front, and the Filipinos were marching on either side with rifles. And I said, "Buddy, where are the tanks?" And he said, "There's no tanks here." So I had to turn the tank around and go back to where the new company area was. And here I found out that one of our soldiers had stepped on a mine and lost both legs and bled to death. But thank God we were lucky, we only lost 2 men out of 225 soldiers.
Out of your maintenance group, your ordnance
Yeah,
group?
heavy maintenance ordnance group.
What about the infantry guys that you supported? They saw some pretty heavy action, didn't
Yeah,
they?
the infantry in Italy was in, you know about that. The infantry is the one that really wins a war. They're backed up by tanks. But the tanks can't go ahead till the infantry clears a path for them in no man's land. But they're great support on flat land for infantry. You can't give the infantry enough credit for what they do and what they cover and have to eat and put up with. They're the backbone of the Army. Without them, I don't think the Air Force could win the war. In fact, at Anzio, we were there 3 months. I think finally at the end they had 2 16-inch railguns, but they buried them under a city in a tunnel. Whenever the planes would go, they put it back in the tunnel. And we had a colored Air Force fighter group there in Anzio. We used to watch the fighters come in, and until one of them, the nose went up and the machine guns went off, so we didn't do that anymore. And actually there was another odd experience there in Anzio. One of our bombers had been to Italy and only had short supply of gas, had to make a landing on a fighter field. I think he was all right. And the other thing about, can't think of that again.
So how was that Italian wine? Did you get to enjoy the...
I had champagne after Anzio for $5. The mess sergeant got me a bottle of champagne. I drank it and my head about split the next day.
And did you eat a lot of spaghetti and good Italian food while you were there?
I only had one good meal, and that's when we were at Pompeii. One Italian American could speak fluent Italian. We were invited by an Italian merchant from Naples to a 5-course meal with cognac cake, and that was the best meal I ever had. And I was fortunate to go with him. I must have been a good friend of his, and that was delicious.
So there were some good times in there.
Yeah.
You had a good group of guys and you were pretty fortunate.
Yeah, we were very fortunate with the Lord's help. You can't give the Lord enough and Jesus enough credit. He really pulled us. My life was saved 7 or 8 times. I had been on the mountain by myself, curiosity killed a cat, and picked up a piece of pipe with a bulb on it. There was a lot of German hand grenades laying around. There could have been booby traps. And when I picked it up, the ball fell on the ground, the fins come out. There was a German bazooka, and it either had the safety pin in it or the ground was soft. Anyway, it should have killed me. It didn't go off thanks to Jesus. I guess I'm here for another reason. What it is, I've had to find out. But I worked a lot when at church. I've been retired. It'll be 22 years in December the 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. I railroad engineer, fourth generation. I had 36 years. Dad had 50, and his father before him worked as a chief clerk in the timekeeper's office. And his father-in-law was a crossing watch, but he got run over by a passenger train going to the toilet on the tracks. So I'm really a fourth generation railroader. My dad always told us to learn a trade, so I learned the mechanical trade, but I worked for Checker Store for a while in Formica. Formica was a billing clerk, and Checker Store was a serviceman.
Did your experience working on the tanks as a mechanic help you in your life after you came back from the war?
Oh, yeah. I kept my government insurance. I had 5,000 in the States and 5,000 when I went overseas. One odd thing at the Fiat plant, I was working in the turret of a Sherman tank. It was about ready to go. And they had filled up the generator with gas and spilled it, and I didn't know that. I put the lid on the battery case and got it sideways and shorted it out. It went on fire. And the men with me jumped out. I grabbed a fire extinguisher and fought it, almost had it out, and then the fire extinguisher ran out of liquid. So I got out of there. It burnt my eyelashes off and the front part of my hair. And he went out and got a big fire extinguisher and put it out. Actually, I got promoted to T5 around that time.
So what was your highest rank?
T5, technical corporal. We ex-soldiers always pray that they'll never have another war. It's something we all need to pray day and night, that the Lord, Jesus, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost will be with us. We never have to go through another war. If we do, well, I guess I would serve, but I think I'm too old. Yesterday was my birthday. I was 83. We went around to see 5 different churches, and I said, I'll go pick out the best. And somebody said, you can't pick out the best, they're all the best, so go to that.
So you were there almost 3 years, right?
34 months.
34 months. You got to see a lot of the world. When you left Cincinnati, did you have any idea what you were going to experience? I mean, you went halfway across the world.
Really, no. Oh, I should say in Africa, in Tobruk, the Germans put salt in the well so we couldn't drink it. And while we were near there in the field, a bomber come over at night and dropped a flare. Our shop trucks hadn't painted their window, and it lit up like a basketball field. The night lit up, and we all ran away from our equipment, praying he wouldn't drop it on us. He didn't. So the captain the next day said, paint all your windows that they don't reflect a flare drop from an airplane. And you definitely could tell the difference between the German bomber and the American planes. The American planes had a smooth sound to it, and the German bombers would go, So you knew which one was over there. So pay attention like you had to pay attention to Anzio Annie. Like I said, at Anzio, they had 270 guns.
Now, when you joined the war, things were not going well for the Americans.
No.
We were really the underdog at that time.
Right.
We were getting our tails beat in the South Pacific, and things weren't looking good. Were you guys worried about it? Did you think maybe we wouldn't win?
No, I thought what would be, and with the Lord's help, thank goodness I had him on my side. I figured I'd do what I had to do, be where I had to be. And we didn't understand the suffering. We knew the Germans were bad, but they were winning all the time, and we had to do the best we could to defeat them.
Were you discouraged sometimes when things weren't going well?
Well, You have to have faith in the Lord. In time, things would work out. You have to keep your mind clear and not to worry that you get shot. If you get shot, you'll be with the Lord in heaven, in paradise, in the mansion. So don't let your mind be. Actually, a lot of soldiers in Anzio were in bad shape from the shells going over all the time.
So it was really hard to
They
live
had a
like that.
battleship. Americans had a battleship firing back at it, but they couldn't locate it. It was in a tunnel under a city there.
So those were rough days for a lot of people, and those, when you guys first defeated the Germans, I mean, that was a big milestone, wasn't
Yeah.
it? You finally seemed like we were making some progress.
Yeah. Actually, when we got north of Rome, we were supposed to invade southern France, but they got a rookie ordnance company, tank ordnance company to go. So we were spared that, another invasion. Invasions are kind of risky.
So how many invasions were you part of altogether?
Just Anzio.
Just Anzio? How was it over there in Africa? I mean, that was like another world. You had people with spears and
Oh,
tribes, and
the-
here you are, you come along, you've never seen anything like that.
Well, in Africa, the Germans said we'd take it easy on us today. We'd be working for them. We had the prisoners of war. Actually, all the time we were there were drums in the background, so we didn't know if they were friendly natives or what they were going to do.
Were
So-
they friendly?
Well, we didn't see too many, thank goodness, of them. So that's.
But it was kind of eerie, wasn't it? It was a big change from Cincinnati.
Oh yeah. In Africa, if you wanted cold water, you'd have to bury it in the sand to get cold of the night.
Did you have
You
sandstorms?
drink nothing but bottled water or bottled anything. Otherwise, you spend all day in the office.
Did you have sandstorms?
Actually, we mainly traveled around the coast. We were lucky to get the breeze of the coast.
When it was hot too, wasn't it?
It was hot, and it gets cold of the night.
And how did the people treat you? Did you see regular civilians very much?
Well, actually, we didn't see too many except in Tripoli. They grow oranges there, and the man was watching us, so we didn't get any oranges.
How about the Italian people? Did you have any interaction with civilians in Italy?
Just in Rome.
How were they? Were they pleased to see the Americans, or did they treat you
I
bad?
think they were. Well, that's the other thing. I was in Rome with my jacket unbuttoned, and the MP picked me up, and I got a week's confinement for not having my jacket buttoned up on paper.
So what did you have to do? Just stay in the.
Just stay in the company.
So they were pretty strict.
Where the Army was, yeah. I have experiences with two American colonels, but I don't want to repeat it.
How did you feel about your enemy? Were they pretty ferocious?
Actually, in Italy, a German prisoner of war was in our company, and he wanted to stay there, but we said the Articles of War said we have to return you to, Russia. You have to turn you to Russia. He said, please don't send me, they'll put me in the infantry again. So we had to return him to Russia. And we learned to speak a little bit Italian, Prelati, Adagio, speak slowly.
And were the civilians kind and friendly, or did they just mind their own business?
Well, they mind their own business when I got 5 days in Rome. And,
You got to see a lot of the world.
yes, I did, thanks to the Army.
And after you got back to the States, you were a civilian again, right? After your 3 years.
Actually, I went back to Formica, and actually when I was a building clerk, I went out and helped make crates, and the foreman decided to do away with my job. So they put me in process engineering, which I couldn't handle. So I took a leave of absence. and stayed off for a while, and then started on the railroad December 20th, 1945, and I could have got 4 years college out of it. I also had a chance to work for Procter & Gamble, but I guess I had railroading in my blood. But I was very unsettled, smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
When you came home?
Yeah, I was a little nervous.
Was it hard to go from being a soldier to being a civilian again?
Well, for me, I was unsettled.
Did you remember all those bombs and hear it in your sleep? And was it hard for
No,
you?
we were fortunate. Mainly, we were 3rd and 4th echelon behind the lines, but we still heard them and we knew them overhead and could recognize the sound of their motor and everything. So.
When you grew up, George, you grew up in the Depression, right? When you were a boy?
Yeah.
Was your family poor?
Well, we were fortunate that way. In the summer, we'd go and help my uncle on the farm raise tobacco, and they would give us food for doing that. I had a brother who was in the 43rd Recon outfit, and we'd get up early and sucker tobacco was due on it. You'd get wet, and you had to squeeze a wormer's head off and walk through it. I couldn't keep up with my brother and uncle. I was younger than them. Then I think they got up 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and milk cows. I couldn't get up for that.
So you had it was a pretty rough time growing up. You guys were used to working hard, so the Army wasn't that different.
No, it wasn't different. What bothered me more was the discipline in the Army. That's where I had trouble with 2 colonels.
Because you didn't do well with
I
following.
wouldn't stay in. They actually said your Army time would count time and a half towards your Army retirement of 20 years. I would have had 6 or 7 years, only 13 years ago, but I didn't like the discipline. And actually, you're not a full civilian when you're in the Army. Your rights are taken away.
So you didn't
Or I
like.
shouldn't say your rights, but you're not a full citizen.
You have to do what they say, and you didn't
do
like.
what they say. That was one to do.
You were a little bit radical, huh? You didn't
I
want to.
was a little radical. I didn't care for that. So.
But you still did a good job, I think, keeping those tanks going. That was important work. Did you feel like you did an important job?
Yes, I like to say we liberated Rome, and I was glad I was with the English 8th Army. They had goons and gazerkas. They were natives if they fought with knives, and they had their wives and would build bonfire on the line that El Alamein. The Germans wouldn't bother them because if they were attacked, they'd go and slit their throat of a night, and the Germans were deathly afraid of them. The British had those
So those were native fighters that joined
foreign
them.
troops.
So they had an interesting combination of people from all over in their army, didn't they?
Yes, like when I went to the front, they were Filipinos marching on either side of the road with rifles. And I wondered why they didn't stop me, but we were very fortunate. We only lost 2 men, one in the Red Sea, and then the man in the new company. We didn't stay in that area. They didn't have all the mines out of there. But in Italy, we even had soldiers in the company who were not even Americans. We had a Portuguese fellow. At Anzio, we built the fellow I was with, a Portuguese fellow. We built a trench and put everything we could on top of it. We thought they were going to drop paratroopers, so I had a submachine gun and a carbine. And one morning going to breakfast, the guy ahead of me, I don't know how far ahead of him, but he got shrapnel in the stomach. And so there was plenty of lead going around in Anzio. A lot of it, like I said, the Germans had 270 guns, and most of them we were within range of it. We were next to a fighter field.
So you got to meet people from all over the world, different soldiers from all different countries, and you got to see a large part of the world too while you were in the Army. So that's a very interesting experience.
Yeah. I've got 3 or 4 bags with pictures of the Army in Cincinnati.
Now you told me that one job you had was helping to develop pictures.
Yeah.
How'd you get that job?
I volunteered, and I could take a copy of what I wanted that way, so he did my picture, so.
Who was somebody supposed to be taking pictures for your unit? Did you have a photographer
I
with you?
don't think so. Actually, there was 2 things that I was very fortunate when we were in Cairo. They wanted to take my tonsils out for smoking 3 packs of cigarettes. I had chronic bronchitis, and I wouldn't let the major do it, and because they had leprosy over there. But I didn't want to get away from my company too.
So you kept your tonsils?
I come home and had them taken out. I went to Dayton, but they had too much major surgery with arms and legs and stuff. So I had it done. I went to Good Samaritan Hospital and paid the doctor $50 and stayed overnight. It was $25, and I paid it myself and had it done before I started work. I had chronic bronchitis.
So did you quit smoking?
I did. It's been about 50 years ago now. I was really a pipe smoker, but you couldn't get pipe tobacco and pipe. You had to get it from home. And I smoked a few cigars too.
Did you get a lot of messages, letters, and things from home when you were over there?
Email was the thing. I was going to bring one, but I didn't. And actually, we made a crystal set out of double-edged razor blades. And out of an Anzio, we brought watch crystals from fighter pilots' plastic glass. So there's a lot of work to get it to the size. And to get it smooth, you have to use toothpaste and rub it and rub it.
So you had a lot of
So we were moving it one time, and a fighter come down and landed without wheels. So one of our men went over and got him out before it caught on fire or something. But I was very fortunate. The Lord must have me here for some reason. I'm very lucky to have survived it. That's why I say, if we can avoid wars, it's the best thing we can do, because a lot of people, especially civilians, land. Oh, in Cairo, I was able to buy a Voigtland camera for $25, and we had a regular army man sold me his air mattress for £1.50. That was $6. So I had an air mattress all the time.
to sleep on?
Yeah,
Oh, you had a setup, didn't you?
yeah, and I bought that off an army man. He thought we were coming home,
But he was sorry you gave that up.
I guess.
What did you guys do for entertainment?
Well, at Anzio, we bought rum from the Navy for $25 and cognac.
Cognac?
And that, we'd sell that, and we got enough money to buy a projector for $1,000, or 1,000 there, I don't know what it should be. So we did have movies at times. But in the States, ping pong was a big entertainment thing.
And you did get letters and things from home occasionally.
Yeah.
The food was pretty good in the
Well,
Army?
the food was passable. A lot of fellows didn't like it, especially. I can't say what it is.
But you,
Beef and gravy, they didn't care for that.
yeah.
And the British had bully beef, canned bully beef, and tea with cream and sugar in it.
So did-
I've been very fortunate. I've got over 3 cancers. One of them's still with me. I got to be checked every 6 months. I have a knee replacement, and with that, they gave me a diabetics to go along.
But you survived,
I survived, why I don't
and you're
know.
83.
83.
Happy birthday.
I figure I'm blessed by God. My dad had asthma, and he was the sickest of two brothers. There were three of them. He went out west, and he was come back and worked in the office of the railroad, but he couldn't stand it, so he went out on the road as engineer. And his other brother, one was a physician, and the other one was a civil engineer. Both of them died at 34 with pneumonia. So instead of getting a lot of education, I went for physical activities. And I used to have to do the shot putting or disc. In fact, I went to automotive and got out of class, electrical class, to teach myself out of the book how to do the shot putting and disc. And I was on relay too. That's when I was smoking, so I wasn't too good at it, but I did it.
Well, is there anything else you want to tell us about your time in the service?
Well, if you have to have a war, you have to have men, and tell them all to pray. Have faith in Jesus, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and pray that we never have another one, or that nobody use the atomic or hydrogen bomb. And get married and have a family and love them and be with them, and thank the Lord for all your blessings.
Thank you for your service to our country.
You're welcome.
Okay.